And so the team owners start making up teams. They go out in this particular team. They get has-beens, just all the people to form a team. And they begin to win. But then the last season of the game, they're winning, but then the strike is broken, and the championship team comes back to play them. And the national champions from the year before are Dallas, which of course shows you that this is a fantasy film. And they are playing, they're getting beaten on and everything. And Keanu Reeves is the quarterback, and he has to give a speech that's going to relate to these guys, that they can understand, that's going to relate to them and their culture background. So, here we go.
I know you're tired. I know you're hurting. And I wish I could say something that was classy and inspirational. But that just wouldn't be our stuff. Paying heels. Chase big stars. Glory.
Thank you. So, one of the greatest dad phrases out there. Paying heels. Chicks dig scars and glory lasts forever. And that lasts, you're talking to a bunch of guys, and I saw a joke the other day from the Babylon Bee that says, fathers gather together and start new hospital. Low-cost health care. Solution to every problem is walk it off. Walk it off. Because that is the culture you're dealing with. And so John is doing the same thing. So a little bit of background here. All the Gospels are going to a different audience. Matthew is a Jew writing to Jews in Jerusalem. Okay? Mark is a Jew writing to a Roman audience. Luke is a Gentile doctor trying to get all the details correct as doctors do. Okay? Because you didn't put this in the right order as it should have been. Okay? Now, we're here with John, and John is a Jew, but he's writing to a Greek culture in Asia Minor. John is the apostle of Asia. Okay? So, a little bit about Asia and Asia Minor at that point in time. About 20% of the population was Jewish, but not Jewish like those who had stayed in Jerusalem like. So, you got to think of it this way. The people who stayed in Jerusalem and around that area, they're the people who are arguing, we are Jewish to the core, there's no variation, we have to keep ourselves separate from everybody. Okay? Those who had moved out into the Asian culture are those people that they haven't turned their back on Judaism, but they've assimilated to a certain degree with the prominent culture, saying, look, we got to live and work with these people. Come on and adapt to this. So, in a Christian environment now, it might be between you and some of your friends, those of your friends who believe, my kids are going to Christian schools, K through 12, going to Christian colleges, we're only going to work with Christian businesses and the like, and those are saying, no, I think we've got to interact with the world. I'm not saying anything's right or wrong here, it's just that the people had a different type of view going on. Now, John is trying to graft the Gentiles into this Jewish tree, because remember, Christianity this time is still Jewish. I mean, this is a Jewish offshoot done by a rabbi called Jesus. Now, Greek culture. The Greeks at that time had developed some incredible insights already, and Western civilization is built on Greek culture. There was one impressive guy called Democritus from about the 4th century BC, and Democritus came up with two incredible ideas. Whoops. The first is democracy, hence his name. He had the idea of, let's let everybody vote. And the Greeks were like, oh, that's nuts. He says, no, I think it'll really work. And he also came up with atomic theory. That's right, in 400 BC, just walking around the beaches of Greece, he was just sitting here going, there must be some basic building block that if we rearrange these, we get different types of matter, and I'm going to call those atoms. Okay? So the guy developed atomic theory, and because of that, we got to worry about Kim Jong-un or Kim Jong-il, whichever Kim Jong it is in North Korea right now. But you think about, this guy came up with that in 400 BC, and if that doesn't intimidate you and make you want to learn some more stuff, I don't know what does. I mean, good grief. But he came up with that. Now, at that time, so the Greeks were sitting here saying everything that's made, the matter we see, is made up of atoms. There's the building blocks, but there's something more. And from the 1st to the 3rd century, they were arguing that there's got to be something else out there, something bigger, that holds this matter together, that directs reality, all of this. And that's the Logos, not Legos. The atoms were the Lego blocks, but the Logos, the Word, was what drove everything. So this is the predominant Greek thought at the time. Now, Here's Jewish culture. In Hebrew, the Word was God's voice. Okay? And to Hebrews, His voice was incorporated in Torah. Remember, Torah is the first 5 books of the Bible: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Okay? And so everything revolved around that. The Torah was actually believed to predate the universe. Not the physical Torah, but the whole idea was this. Torah was wisdom, God's wisdom. This is what created and drove the universe. Okay? And so the Torah that they had was just written down. But the Torah itself predated the universe, came from God, etc. Now, you think about that mentality, and now let's read the first chapter of John. In the beginning was the Word, Logos, specifically what they use there. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning, and through Him all things were made. Without Him nothing was made that has been made. In Him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Now, I'd like you to think about what's just going on. Those first verses, this gospel out there, here's the audience, and here's what they've been going through. The Greeks would have been nodding their head. Yes, the Logos. That's right. It drove everything. And the Logos has been here from the beginning. That's right. Great. And the Logos created everything. He. What? He. No, stop. Logos isn't a he. Logos is a thing. What are you talking about? Now, simultaneously, the Jews would have been nodding their head at the same time. That's right. Logos, Torah. That was before everything. That was with God. The Word was God. That's great. He. Wait a minute. So in the exact same word, John gets his audience in that culture, both audiences, going, wait a second, what did you just say? And throws them a curveball that says, you aren't looking at this right. Now, I'm a professor. I write for a living, okay? And I have to write articles, and they get reviewed by 3 other people that I don't know, and they come back and they say, we don't like this, and we like this, and I have to go through this. And one of my papers, I went through editing and revision for the journal 5 years, okay? I have multiple graduate degrees, and I'm telling you, this is hard. John was a fisherman. He wasn't educated. He hadn't gone to Athens and, studied with the top scholars at the time. He's a fisherman. And I'm here to tell you, to be able to write this way, to be able to get issues across this way, I mean, it may not register with you, but for me, this is a sign of inspiration, because I just know how hard this is. And this guy just cranks this stuff out. Now, he also uses some other things. Here he is talking about 7 I am statements in John. Now, to Jews, when we say I am, what are they thinking? They're thinking God, right? I mean, that was God. God sends Moses out and tells them, I am sent you. They're going, okay, yeah, we got this. We don't even need to listen because this is stuff we know already. Well, wait a minute. Jesus said, I am multiple times through John. He said, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. I'm the true vine. Okay? And all of us, we've gone to church, we've heard these things before. But here's what the culture would have been hearing when he went through. To the Greeks, as soon as he starts saying this, Jesus is throwing down. He's challenging every Greek there, because Greeks, remember the pagan culture, they had all those gods that you studied in junior high, the mythology, and, they all had. It'd be interesting to see what psychologists and psychiatrists would assess the Greek gods at that time, because they just had problems. Okay. Now, here's what the Greeks heard. I am the bread of life. That is Demeter, or Ceres. Ceres is where we get the word cereal. So if you had your tricks this morning, you can thank Ceres. All right? And so he was the god of provision. John 8, the light of the world. That's Apollo. He was the sun god. Okay? John 10, the door for the sheep. A little couple things, but probably the best fit is Janus. Janus was the two-faced god. He was the god of transitions. That's where we get the word January, because we're moving from one year to another. Okay? So, here's your little history lesson. So when January rolls around, and somebody calls you two-faced, you're like, well, yeah. John 10, the Good Shepherd. The shepherd was Pan. He was the guy, half goat, half man, So he was the shepherd. John 11, the resurrection and life. That was, and I can never pronounce this correctly because I'm not a doctor, Cephalus. Okay, this was the basis. This was the god of medicine. Okay, and this was a guy who was sent to live with the centaurs growing up, and the centaurs taught him healing. And there's all sorts of bizarre stuff there that he actually healed a guy that Zeus didn't like, and so Zeus killed him because he had healed the other guy, and the centaurs resurrected Cephalus, and so, yeah, it just goes. But this particular play of this was shown 2 to 3 times a day in all the major cities that John would have been sending this to in Asia Minor. And then you got the way, the truth, and the life. That's Athena, the goddess of truth. And if you want to head down to Nashville sometimes, they've got, the statue of Athena and the Parthenon there, and Zeus there. In John 15, this is the one I love, the true vine. That was Dionysius, the god of wine and orgies. This was the god that had the largest following in ancient times. Some things don't change throughout life, okay? So this is what the Greeks are hearing, okay? Now, Jesus was saying something very direct and challenging to all of them. He's going, everything you're looking for when you worship Janus, no, you can find it in me. Everything you're looking for when you follow Apollos, you can find it in me. And in fact, all these guys are imposters. They're counterfeits. I'm the real deal. I can give you what you're really looking for and not what you think you're looking for. I'll give you the real thing, probably not in the way you want it, but it is the real thing. And that's one of the things we got to realize, not just with everyone in the world, but ourselves. As a business professor, I teach my students that the most important thing you're going to do and the most difficult thing you're going to do is figure out what people want. Not what they say they want, but what they really want. I'll give you an example. When you go to the doctor, what do you like least about going to the doctor? You got to wait? Yeah, stinking doctors. They double book just so they can make the most money. You got to wait. And I ask my undergraduate students, and they all say, yeah, waiting, we just hate this. I said, okay. Now, I want you to think back to last Friday, before this week's test. You're sitting down to study for my test. But a couple of your friends call, and they say, hey, 2 new clubs have just opened up. We're going to go. And you're going, study, go have fun. Yeah, forget Prater's exam. You head off. Now, these 2 clubs happen to be side by side. You pull up one club, there's no line. You can walk straight in the door. The other club has a line out the door wrapped around the building. Which club do you go to? And they immediately go, well, the one with the line. And I'm like, well, what? And they said, well, that's what everybody wants to be. So apparently that's the happening place. I want to go there. I said, that's impossible. Because you just told me you don't like waiting in line. And they go, What people say they want and what they really want are 2 different things. And so the people in our world, and ourselves included, just like the Greeks then, Jesus was saying, you say you want this, I can give you the real deal. And it's probably not what you really want right now. It's not what you're saying you want, but deep down inside, it's what you really want. Because I can give you real life. And this was radical to what they were doing. The Jews were hearing the same thing. All those I am statements, the Jews would have gone, Torah, Torah, God, Torah, Torah, God. Yeah, nope. But you're going, Jesus, wait a minute. Wait a minute. But it was the same thing he was telling the Jews. Things have changed. There's something better now. Now, John also uses 7 signs throughout John. Now again, remember, this is for the Jews. The Greeks might not have picked up on all this at the first time, but this is for the Jews. Remember, 7 has a very specific number in religious aspects. It's perfection. Right? And so, how many days were there of creation? And after 7, there was what? The new creation, right? You got the garden. God's the gardener. He puts people in it. And so he goes through all this, and John, the professor in me, really likes this. Because he's stepping them through it. Because you're going, you guys just don't get some stuff. You should be able to get this, but he literally states, when Jesus' first miracle, this was the first sign. This was the second sign. Trying to get across the Jews. Count, guys. Okay? The 7th sign was the resurrection of Lazarus. Okay? So the Jews are going, okay, there's the 7. So the next thing that happens is going to be the new creation. And what happens? Jesus is resurrected. And this is the other reason why people will often talk about the synoptic gospels, and they'll say, well, one gospel didn't include what was included over here, and this shows that the Bible's wrong. No, it shows that it was written for different groups to focus on different things. And this is a particular case. Here's John. John talks about, here's a gardener, here's the garden, because that's where the tomb was, and a woman comes in and talks to the gardener. Now, in other gospels, we know that other women came too. But people put out, see, John didn't include that. So this just can't be true. No, John was sitting here trying. It's like when I'm teaching to undergraduates that aren't getting the thing that I kept drilling on them for day after day. It's like, okay, I'm going to make this as simple as possible. One woman talking to a gardener in a garden. You're Jewish. What should come to your mind? And they're going, oh, Garden of Eden. He said, yeah, okay. He's basically giving them a cheat sheet. And any of you who've taught know what I'm talking about. When the kids just aren't getting it, it's like, okay. Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Okay. Now, here comes the question. Here was this fisherman writing in such a way that got these deep theological concepts all through John. But when you're first reading it, you may not pick up on that stuff. But it's there. And to the audience he was talking to, it registered. How do we do that? Well, Jesus was the great physician, and I would argue for all of us, we need to be like doctors. I want you to think about your favorite doctor. What do? Well, they're caring. They care about you. They want to get to know you. They want to know what drives you, what you're doing. Okay? They're going to try and give you good advice. And yes, sometimes they're going to tell you things you don't want to hear. Okay? And you may get angry and you may get upset, but you'll come back because you know deep down, they care about me. In fact, okay, I'm a researcher, I will tell you the biggest predictor of whether a doctor is going to be sued for malpractice or not is not whether they actually did something wrong or not. It's their bedside manner. Okay? If they're caring and nice and actually did the wrong thing, most people won't sue. They meant well. But they could have actually done all the right things. But they're arrogant and sort of haughty, and you're going to sue them. Going to sue them. Okay. And we can... It's early in our marriage, Gretchen and I she was pregnant. We're trying to get pregnant. And we were in California, and we were visiting some friends. And early in the morning, she just woke up in great pain. We take her in the emergency room. The surgeon's checking her out, and the surgeon knew she was a doctor. And he said, it's appendicitis. And my wife said, look, I know it's in the same quadrant, but it's not presenting like classical appendicitis. And he looks down at her and sneers, well, you're just a pediatrician, aren't you? And that's when I forgot about Christian love. And I'm like, I don't know who you are, jerk. I said, but I'll take her feelings over your knowledge any day of the week. Okay? Well, long story short, he's wheeling her in. He said, I'll be back in 20 minutes. 5 hours later, he was wrong. She'd been right. She nearly bled on the table. But that's the kind of thing, is caring. But the key thing is caring in aspects of that. And yes, as Christians, we sometimes have to tell people in the world, that's wrong. That's sin. That's not what's best for you. And it may go against our culture and everything else, but it's a function of how we do it. And we've also got to be creative and be sneaky. I got a great doctor. He's my neighbor. He's my hunting partner. And he's sneaky too. A couple years ago, he's like, we need to check out your heart. We need to get you on a treadmill and really crank it up. I said, okay. So comes in, puts me on the treadmill, and hooks up the things, and then he steps out. And this young, pretty 22-year-old nurse walks in. And I'm intellectually, I know what he's doing. And she comes in and she pats me on the hand. Now, Dr. Prater, you're not as young as you used to be. So you just tell me if you start to hurt and feel bad. And I intellectually knew what was going on. But it didn't matter. The testosterone was flowing. I'm like, you crank that thing up. And I mean, she had that cranked up and all the way up. And I am dying. But I am not going to show weakness. And I mean, she stops it and she steps out. And I'm like, and he walks in. And I looked at him and said, Tom, the next time we go hunting, he goes, yes. I said, I'm going to shoot you. He said, I knew exactly what you were doing. He's like, yeah. He said, I wanted to get the best results. He goes, for the women, I send in this young male nurse I've got. And I'm like, but he also knew I don't like taking medications. So years ago, my cholesterol was high, and he said, listen, I need to put you on this medication. I said, Tom, I don't like medication. He said, if it makes you feel any better, I'm on this too. Okay. So I go on it. Now, the first thing he put me on gave me some leg cramps, so he switched it. And so years later, it comes up. Again, it's my neighbor, and he looks up and he said, hey, what was the first medication I put you on that you didn't respond for? I said, this one. I said, you got me on that? I said, yeah. Yeah, I probably need to take that one. I looked at him and said, wait a second. I thought you told me you were already on this. And he just smiled and he said, I lied. You just need to be on this. And I'm going, good doctors find ways to get it across to you, but they also do it with caring and love. And yes, they may tell you things you don't want to hear. But because they built that relationship with you, you're more open to hearing it. And that's the same thing we have to do as Christians. Now, as we've talked about before, social media is designed to keep us angry. It's designed to keep us angry because the angrier we are, the more we look, the more we click, and that makes money for the tech companies. And as we've talked before, we as Christians are to be peacemakers, which is extremely difficult with social media and the way most of us use it. Okay? And the catch is this. Today we are in a culture that with social media, everybody's just driven to own the other side. And I don't care what side that is. And right now we're having a discussion about the abortion aspect from SCOTUS. Today, I don't care which side you fall on that. Okay? But what I'm talking about is that for this, regardless of the viewpoint, there's some basic things we need to understand as Christians. Trying to own the other side, is never going to do anything. Think about it yourself. If your doctor came to you and said, listen, you've really got to change your diet or you become diabetic and these negative things are going to happen and I really don't want to see that with you, we've got to do this and if we do it now it's going to be easier, etc. Or if your doctor comes in and says, listen, you're lazy, you're undisciplined, you're not going to eat right, and you're going to die early. And I don't have to deal with it. So change. They may have owned you, okay, but they didn't get anything done, okay? And social media is designed to get you to want to own the other side. But as Christians, that's not what we're supposed to do. Second, regardless of where you fall on this debate, there's one reality that doesn't change. There are going to be young women out there that need our love and our support and our compassion, period. And God calls us to reach out to these people. So how? A couple things. Understand that there's gray even in clear-cut issues of moral decisions. Okay? Now, I've told y'all through the years, Gretchen and I are pro-life, but yet, multiple times during our lives, especially when we were early married, we had friends come to us, and in two of those cases, we advised them to get an abortion. And you may be saying, how in the world can you do that? Well, I'll tell you why. Because in both cases, the child had a trisomy defect. This is a chromosomal defect where all the organs form outside the child's body. There's no way to deal with it. There's no way to have any type of operation or thing like that. If it was a female, there are records of females going full term and actually living for a short period of time. No male has ever gone full term and lived. And in both these cases, they were males. And in both these cases, the mother's health was seriously in jeopardy. Both these sets of friends were pro-life. Their doctors or OB-GYNs were pro-life. And even their OB-GYNs were going, no, and we were the same way? No. Because this is just the physical reality. There's those shades of gray that are out there, okay? And that's just simple reality. And even in other discussions we may have, within the community in these discussions, it's talking about personal responsibility, okay? There's aspects of that. And yet, there's also talk about saying, all right, but there's not going to be an exception, for example, rape or incest. Well, if you want to talk about personal responsibility, now you get into other scriptural issues, because now you're asking somebody to take responsibility for something they didn't do, that was done to them. And I'm not going to sit here today and debate these. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm trying to say is that there are legitimate scriptural reasons to understand that there are shades of gray. Now, just to give you a little broad on this, 16% of all abortions are to evangelical Christians. Just thought you need to know that. Different groups in general, African American Christians are pro-life, but they don't take that as a one-issue thing. You might say, for lack of a better phrase, their whole life, because they talk about, it's just not just the birth. And this is a criticism that is given to Christians from the left. They said, okay, if you push this and you're just pro-birth, not pro-life, okay? That's something that needs considered as well. And so that brings up some other considerations we might need to learn. First, it is easy for people on any side of an issue to go and say, well, government needs to take care of that and get a law passed and etc. And we live in a democracy. We are Americans. Don't get me wrong. You should vote. You should push for those laws you feel are best for our country. Don't get me wrong. But I'm talking about here as Christians. It's easy to say, the government did it. This shows my love. Oh, please. It is, love is thrown around in our culture for everything. I love my wife. I love my children. I love that Frappuccino. I love the new Netflix series. It just has all these different terms. Scripturally, love is defined as self-sacrifice. Jesus loved us. How do we know? He died. Okay? Self-sacrifice. And so, just having the government do it is not love. As Christians, if we are to show love, it has to be sacrificial. So let's think about that. That's actually how Christians changed the world in the first place. Here's the Roman Empire. And they eventually made Christianity the language of the empire. How? Two key things were in the early days of Christianity, there were two plagues that destroyed the Roman Empire. Best we can think, one was the bubonic plague, one was probably smallpox. We're talking about cities, 25% plus of the population died outright. All right? Now, the physicians of the day, and I can't remember the little poem that was done, but Galen's is a very famous physician, and his stuff was written out through the years. But he had a basic poem that says, if you see the plague, the cure is quick, fast, and long. You quickly run away, you run fast, and you run long away from everything. That was his medical solution. Okay? And this is a record from the Emperor Justinian, who was trying to reinstate paganism. Christians cared for the pagans. Because at that time, if you got sick, your own family would dump you out on the street. Nobody cared for anybody. But the Christians cared for themselves, and they cared for their neighbors who were pagans, who just the week before had been trying to kill them. And many Christians got the same diseases, and they died. And yet the people of the Roman Empire were so stunned by this, they're like, maybe we ought to listen to what they're saying. And in fact, this is a statement from Justinian, where he's telling us that this is bad. We don't care for people. The Christians care for our people. And again, why do the Christians do it? Because if you're a pagan and the only view of eternal life you have is sort of in Hades, you're going, what? I want mine now. And Christians were saying, we will risk our lives as Christ commanded us to, because we don't have to worry about death. Faith does matter. Now, let's move up into the Middle Ages. Now, what is this? This is on my dad's side of the family. He came from Britain, And I love the Brits. They keep records for everything. And so we were able to track our family back to AD 900. Here, that is the Prater Ancestral Castle. Well, it's not really a castle, sort of like a house, but you know. All right? And this went back because basically this was Frome, F-R-O-M-E. This was the town outside Bath. But this was the first Roman imperial capital, Frome, F-R-O-M-E, before they moved it to London. And so there would have been a contingent of the imperial guard, praetorians. And in the Roman Empire, when you finished your term of duty, wherever you were stationed at that time, you got land. That was your retirement. And so, as much as we can figure, there were praetorian guards. They got retired there, and that's where we come from. Now, I tell you this to say, not that, but to look at that castle and what is around that castle. A moat, okay? So even all these moats, okay? Now, the moat was there for defensive purposes, but in practical aspects, it was also used for other things. In the Middle Ages, you know, there weren't the medications to induce abortions and things of this sort, because healthcare, you know, was very rudimentary. You didn't do that. So what people did is if you had an unwanted child, you tossed it out the window into the moat. And throughout the Middle Ages, Christians would get in rowboats early in the morning and go row around the moats of the castles and pick up the children that were abandoned and raise them themselves. That is self-sacrificial love. Okay? Now, what about us? I know a group of retired men at the congregation we had back in Tennessee. They woodworkers. They built beautiful handmade wooden cribs and rocking chairs and wooden toys. And they had a relationship with the L&D, Labor and Delivery Wards, on the hospitals there in town. And the nurses would contact them if there was a single mother that came into the ward. And they would come by and give that single mother all this, you know, crib, rocking chair, toys, etc., to help her on this start. Because, you know, it's tough being a single mother. And put them in touch with the church's programs to continue with education and food and support. Okay? And nobody knew they were doing it. Okay? I happened to find out because I was at one of the guys' houses and I looked over and I'm like, "What? You got some more grandkids coming?" He goes, "No." I said, "Then what are 6 cribs doing over there?" And this is what God called us to do. To care for people quietly, one-on-one, self-sacrificially. That is a language that every culture understands. When I teach international business, students always love to point out, "Oh, well, this culture does this, and this culture does, and look, they do this differently, and da-da-da." And I'm like, "Yep, that's all correct." I said, "But what you're forgetting is the opposite of that." And they said, "What's that?" Every culture you go in the world has the same basic concepts that are always there. I'm like, "What?" I said, "You will not find a culture anywhere in the world, nor anywhere in history, where it says, stab your best friend in the back. That's a good thing to do. Cowardice, woohoo, that's great. Okay, don't take care of your children. That's awesome. No, every culture in the world, people love their families. They want a better life for their kids. And if you help take care of them and their children in a way that you would take care of your own, that's something they're not expecting. And that is the language that speaks to any culture and anywhere. So I'll leave this class with this. Today, we're in a culture that's divided. Today, we're in a culture that's screaming at each other and trying to own each other. And regardless of where you fall on any of these issues, the bottom line is this. As Christians, we are called to sacrificially care for other people. So what are we going to do? Well, I'll leave that to each of you, because y'all are creative. I'm not. Okay? I just have to point some stuff out and go. But that's what God calls us to do. Okay? So, the bell should have rung, but maybe because the fire alarm went off, it's not going. So, I'm going to let you out because I think I'm in trouble. No. My wife has raised her hand, which means I'm sorry for whatever I did. And if you just let me go to my room and think about it, I'll come up with a reason it's not. Yes, dear. I'm not really sure how to take that, dear. I'm really not sure how to take that, dear. But yes, it is somewhat fun. Y'all may have seen the Maverick movie and the like, and it was great. That the first Top Gun movie, I'm just getting out of undergraduate. I'm going to graduate school at Georgia Tech, and I felt that the movie came out right as I was finishing up undergraduate, and I felt just like Tom Cruise. Yes, the world is my oyster. I can do all this. And now the latest Maverick movie, I can really relate to that too. You're looking back in your life going, yeah, I could have done that differently. Yeah, that was not the thing to do right there. No, that was wrong. And so I'm sitting here going, I'm glad it took this long, but I don't know how I should feel about this movie anymore. I liked it better just when I was young and cocky. But life sort of smacks you around. In any case, y'all have a good week and take care. And be sure and go back and watch Keanu Reeves, Yes, sir.
Three Top Gun instructors
Oh, yeah.
on YouTube the other day, and the topic of discussion was the latest Top Gun movie. They all gave it a thumbs up. It was pretty cool.
Do you know the key advisor for the first Top Gun movie was Jerome Albert Wars something, and so they took his initials, and his call sign was Jaws. But he graduated Georgia Tech in the 70s. Yes.
So good.
I'm a professor. I'm used to that.
I know, but it's the first time ever I've done that. Did a lot of yard work.